What's going on, everyone? Sorry about that. I had to restart it because the Wi-Fi is terrible here. Internet's terrible here. So y'all come on in and join me. We're going to talk a little bit more about leasing today. This is Facebook Live with the Fist Pump Guy, Bondy's Toyota, and we're talking about leasing versus purchasing today. And I think it's a conversation that needs to be had. What's up, Big Daddy? It's a conversation that needs to be had because a lot of people, Sean Hayes, what's happening, brother? There's a lot of people who don't understand leasing. So we're going to find out why I believe that leasing is probably a more viable option than purchasing in many, many cases. So as you come on in, I'm going to start covering a little bit of things that I covered yesterday. So if you are in the car business, or if you're not, if you're a customer looking for a good way to get a quality new car every few years, leasing is your option. Okay, I got to admit, when I first started in the car business, I didn't really understand leasing. I didn't understand why it was even beneficial. I had the same mentality as most consumers, is that I don't own my car when I lease. But I'll get into that at a later time. Yesterday I talked about the Laura, how you doing today? Hope you're having a great day. Leasing is the way to go, and we're learning some advantages of leasing over purchasing, and I'm going to cover advantage number 2 today. Absolutely, Sean Hayes. I agree. I just leased my first Tundra a year ago. If I'd have known what I know now, I'd have leased all my cars because I like to trade every 3 years. So having said that, average trade cycle, we talked about this yesterday, is every 2 to 3 years. Most people trade every 2 or 3 years. If you trade every 2 or 3 years, what do you have to worry about if you're purchasing a car? You have to worry about negative equity. You got to worry about what the market dictates your trade is worth. You also have to worry about what the dealership may dictate your trade is worth. So if you're trading off a purchase, typically you have some form of negative equity that rolls into the next purchase, right? Also, even if you paid cash, you still have to worry about the depreciation factor in a purchase of a vehicle. With a leasing, you don't have to worry about the depreciation factor, which is what we talked about yesterday. You get done with your lease, as long as you're within your mileage and the leasing guidelines, and you turn it in, you get a new car, okay? Today, I'm going to go a little bit different avenue today and kind of go right along with what I talked about yesterday. The question may come up, what if you already have a car that you're purchasing? And what if you have some negative equity? What do you do with that car at that point? Let's say you got 2 or 3 more years left on your term, and you definitely want a new car, but you definitely going to have some negative equity. Let's say you got 2 or 3 grand negative equity. I would say you could still lease a vehicle with that. Why would I say that's a viable option? Well, if you purchase another vehicle and you're rolling that negative into that car, well, you're going to have that negative plus whatever you get when you purchase your new car, right? So in a couple of years, you may have $6,000, $8,000, $9,000, $10,000 negative equity versus what you can do with a lease. Because let's face it, most cars, they probably depreciate 40 to 50% in 3 years, okay? But if you're leasing, there's a guaranteed value placed on that vehicle by the manufacturer that you don't have to worry about because you're not trading a vehicle. Now, if you decide to trade it earlier, you would still have to worry about the value of the vehicle. But if you keep it through the full term of the lease, you turn it in, get your new car, and you're on your way. But as I asked, what about if you already own a car? What if you're purchasing a car, not necessarily owning it, but what if you're purchasing it, you still have a couple years left on the term? Let's say it was a 72-month term, and you've been paying on it 3 years, 3.5 years, and you're ready to get a new vehicle, because most people are. What do you do at that point? Well, like I said, if you purchase another vehicle and you trade it, you're going to have negative equity rolled onto that new term, which would inflate the payment. Sometimes you may have to go extended terms that you don't want to go. Let's say you're doing a 60-month term now, and to get to the payment you're comfortable with, you may have to go to a 72, 75, and what I see sometimes, an 84-month term, which I really don't like to do for consumers, but sometimes that's the case if they buy a really expensive vehicle. What's up, guys? We're talking about leasing versus purchasing today and why I think it is a viable option and probably an advantage over purchasing. Today, if you have negative equity, which most people do that's purchased a vehicle and they're wanting to trade every 2 or 3 years, right? So I already told you yesterday that you don't have to worry about negative equity so much with a lease, because if you keep through the lease term, there's no trade involved. So you turn the vehicle in and get you a new one. What's up, John? How you doing today? So yesterday I said don't worry about negative equity, right? Because when you lease, you don't have to worry about it. When you purchase, you do. Well, today, if you already have a vehicle that you're paying on, a purchase of, say, a 72-month term or whatever, and you want to trade that, there is negative equity there. Regardless of vehicle, most of the time there's some form of negative equity, because even if the book says it's worth X amount of dollars, the dealership still has to look at it and say, well, I understand that's what they say, but what can I sell it for? Okay, what am I selling new ones for versus the one you're trading? Something that. So today I want to say, if you lease a vehicle, okay, which I think is probably a better option for most people nowadays, because almost everybody trades every few years. So if you have negative equity in your current vehicle, guess what you can do? You can take that negative and roll it into a lease. Okay. Now, what will that do? Will it increase your lease payment? More than likely. But let's say that your lease payment was going to be $450. All right, or say $500. And let's say a purchase, if you were to trade that car on a purchase, it would have been $500. Okay, so let's say the payments are the same if you trade in on a lease or a purchase. Well, the lease would still be a better option for you. Why? Because you'd get another vehicle in 2 or 3 years, whatever your lease was, and you'd get to walk away from that negative equity that you had on that prior vehicle. If you purchased a vehicle in 3 years, you're still sitting on the same negative equity you traded in on that purchase, on that regular term, right? So what am I saying here? That if you have negative equity, and it's it depends on the amount. I'm not going to sit here and say that every lease special, every lease company, every manufacturer has the same advantages on this. But if you have a couple grand, which most people do, you can roll that into a lease, and in 3 years or 2 years or whatever your lease term is, you walk away from all the negative equity and you starting over. Okay. Now, if you have marginal credit, for example, this is a good option for you too. Even if that lease payment's higher, okay, and you've rolled some negative equity in there, you can still walk away from that in 3 years, right? So then you start over and you get a new car. So today's advantage, and I want y'all to hear me on this, today's advantage is, if you have a little bit of negative equity and you're considering a lease over a purchase, definitely take the lease option, because if you want to get out of that negative equity, that's how you're going to do it faster, because you'll get out of that negative equity in 3 years versus they're out here joshing me at the window. You'll get out of that negative equity in 3 years versus the term. You will still be sitting on it in 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, whatever your term is. So today's advantage in leasing over purchasing is the fact that you can roll some negative equity into a lease, and in 3 years you walk away from the lease and you starting over, getting you a new car. And that's what you want to do every 2 to 3 years, because it's been proven that most people trade every 2 to 3 years. That's not everybody. What's up, Dave Clayton? Not everybody, but for the most part, on average, trade cycles every 2.5 to 3 years. And if you want a new car every 3 years and you're purchasing through a regular term, you're going to have negative equity. That's just a given fact. There's really not much you can do about it. Even if you put money down, a lot of times the depreciation is faster, depending on the brand, depending on the vehicle, than you want it to be. So Monday, I'm going to come back with another one. I'm not going to do one on Saturday, another lease advantage over purchase. So hopefully this has helped somebody out there that's looking for a new car. If you have questions about leasing in my area or somebody like that, give me a call, 334-447-0585. You see my sign up here, the Fist Pump Guy at Bondy's Toyota. I'm glad to help. I love assisting customers. I talk about leasing almost every day with every customer I talk to, because most consumers don't understand the truth about leasing, and that's what we're here to do. All right, thank you for joining. This has been the Fist Pump Guy, selling cars the right way, because it's the only way I know. Follow the Fist Pump Enterprise.